Hi, boys and girls. It's Miss Kelly, and we are up to day 14 of our review and routines. So before we get started today, you are going to need to have a pencil and a paper with you to make some notes on. So if you go and if you have Postit Notes or even just a scrap of paper or any paper that you have around the house and a pencil, and we will get started. Okay, our learning goals today are to practice our active listening. We're going to listen and respond to a story. We're going to learn about annotating a text. And we're going to continue to build stamina for independent reading. How many of you have ever owned or have seen or heard of a super soaker? The water gun, a super soaker. I remember when super soakers first came out, and they were a really big deal, and they were like the hot toy to have at that time. Well, today, the book that we are going to be listening to is a story about the man who invented the super soaker, among other things. So our read aloud today is going to be a story called Whoosh, Lonnie Johnson's Super Soaking Stream of Inventions by Chris Barton. So before we get to the read aloud today, we're going to start off by talking about what it means to annotate text. And you may have done this before. Your teacher may have called it marking up text. And it's basically when you write either on a Post-it note or on a separate sheet of paper, or sometimes you can even write on the text itself to make little notes to sort of remind yourself of things. So basically, annotating is a fancy word for taking notes or adding little comments. And it's kind of fun because you get to use almost like a little secret code. So today we're going to learn how to annotate a text, and that will help you to remember things in the text. It'll help you to connect the text to your own thinking. It will also help you to track your thinking as you read. So if you think of something as you're reading, you make a little notation and you can come back to that later. So some of the common symbols that we use when we're annotating a text might be to underline, and we might underline a key detail, or we might underline something that we think is really, really important, or that we're going to have to remember later in the story maybe. Another symbol is a star, and a star might be an important idea. It might be like what you think is the main idea. Maybe if you're reading a nonfiction text, if there's a fact that really jumps out at you, you can put a little star there. Sequencing. We know that sequence means putting things in the order that they happened. So numbering, putting little numbers in circles. This came first, this came next, this came last. That helps you to organize the story in your mind. Circling a keyword or phrase. Let's say you come across a word and you don't know what it means, and you're curious about it, or you want to come back to it later. You can circle that word, and that just tells you, okay, I have to come back to that word later, or I think this word is very important, and I want to make sure that I remember it, or that I mark it on my text so that I can come back to it at a later time. Sometimes we have questions about the text. We might wonder something, or we might have a question about something that's going on, and you can use a question mark for that. And an exclamation point could be something that you found really interesting, and you could even comment a little bit more about this in the margin or on a Post-it note. So these are just some of the symbols that you can use when you are annotating a text. Now, when you're annotating, you can use Post-it notes. You can use different colors. Some people color code when they're annotating. You can read the passage more than one time. Sometimes the first read through, you're just kind of getting an idea of what the passage says. And the second time through is when you might do your annotating. You can highlight, use a highlighter marker. You can share your annotations with a partner or with a group to kind of show them what you thought was important in the text. Now, the power of annotating, why is this so important? Well, first of all, it helps us to focus on what we are reading. So if we are annotating a text, we're reading a little bit closer, right? We're taking like a magnifying glass to it. It helps us to understand details, keep track of our thoughts and feelings as we're reading. It helps us to keep track of important details so that we don't forget them later on. If we're going to be discussing a text, it helps us to be prepared for the discussion, right? To make notes or circle or underline things that we might need during that discussion. And annotating also helps us to prepare for writing about a text. If we're going to be writing about it, there are some things that we might need to include in our writing piece, and we may want to use our annotating symbols so that we don't forget them. So what can we annotate in a text? Well, pretty much anything. We can annotate certain plot points. We've been talking a lot about connections, and you guys have been doing a great job making connections. So you can annotate your connections. Remember, text to text, text to self, text to world, text to media. Keywords are really, really good things to annotate because you can come back to them. You can go look them up if you're not sure what they mean. Predictions are always great because you can then look back and see, was your prediction correct? And also a favorite part, right? If there's a favorite part of what you're reading, you can underline that or circle that and just say, I really enjoyed reading this part. And when you go back to it later, maybe you're sharing with a group or with a partner, and you can go back to what you annotated as being your favorite part and explain to them why you chose it. So here are the symbols again, and I added 2 more here. We have underlining for key details, starring an important idea, making numbers for sequences of events, circling a keyword or phrase, putting a question mark next to something you're not so sure about, putting an exclamation point next to something that really something that really stands out. And I put a letter C here. The C can be for a connection, text to text, text to self, text to world, or text to media. And also a little heart for your favorite part or your favorite passage or your favorite line. So let's try annotating. Let's try this and see how it works. Okay, I'm going to get out of this for just a second. Here's a paragraph from the story, Lonnie Johnson's Super Soaking Stream of Inventions. So let's say that we are reading this book and we're going to annotate the text, okay? So the page that we're on has this paragraph on it. Lonnie loved building and creating. Ideas for inventions just kept on flowing. He learned how to make rockets from scratch. Kids at school gathered to watch Lonnie launch them. And he learned how to make rocket fuel. When it caught fire in the kitchen, Lonnie's mom didn't make him stop. She just sent him to work outside. So I'm going to go back to this slide and I'm going to actually borrow a couple of these symbols. I'm going to borrow the heart, and I'm going to put the heart, actually going to put the heart over here. I love that his mom did not make him stop inventing. She just wanted him to be safe, right? So she didn't say, Lonnie, stop those crazy inventions. She just told him, go outside, right? Where you're not going to catch the kitchen on fire. So I love that part of the paragraph that mom was not stopping him, but she just wanted him to be a little bit safer. Another thing that stood out to me, I'm going to borrow this letter C. I'm going to go back to the text. And I'm going to put the C right in this. Kids at school gathered to watch Lonnie launch them. I put a C there because I'm making a text-to-self connection. And when I was a student in school, I remember that there was a rocket launch contest where kids could build rockets. And then we all went back outside to the playground behind the school and they launched them and we got to watch the rocket launch. So when I read that sentence about Lonnie launching his rockets and the kids at school kind of gathered to watch him do that, that's what that reminded me of. It reminded me of when I was a student in school watching my classmates launch their rockets. So those are some annotations that I might make while I'm reading this paragraph. They're just things that I really liked or things that I made a connection to. So as you're reading, something might pop into your mind, and that would be the perfect time to make an annotation. So there are my annotations in the text. Okay, now here's a page from the book, and oops, let me get out of this. Here's a page from the book, and again, if I was going to annotate this text, I might read the pages first and then look at my annotation marks and decide what kind of stood out to me here. Okay, bamboo shooters, rubber band guns, erector set, go-kart engine, bolts and screws and other spare parts his dad let him bring in from the shed, and various other things he'd hauled back from the junkyard. Lonnie loved building and creating. Ideas for inventions just kept on flowing. So I'm going to say a key detail is that Lonnie loved inventing. So I'm going to put the little underline, ideas for inventions just kept on flowing. I'm going to underline that sentence because I think that's a key detail. He keeps inventing things. Now, one thing I wasn't sure about was a bamboo shooter. I don't know what that is. So I'm going to put the question mark next to that because I don't really know what that is. So that's something that I might want to go and look up. Okay, I'm looking around. And I actually think that all of these examples of things that he built, I'm putting the star there because I think that is very important to show that he's thinking of lots and lots of different things that he's building from all of these different things that he's finding. So that tells me that he's probably very creative and he's probably very, very good at building things with his hands. And I think that's going to be important later on in the story. So I'm going to put a star there. Okay, so let's see what it looks like when I have annotated my text. Okay, so I put my symbols. Remember, I put the line under ideas for inventions just kept on flowing down here. I wasn't really sure what a bamboo shooter was, so I put the question mark up here. And then I put a star next to these 4 examples of things that he is building, right? Bamboo shooter, rubber band gun, erector set, go-kart engine. So I'm putting a star there because I think that shows that he's pretty creative and he's very good at building things with his hands. And I have a feeling that's going to be important later on in the story. Okay, now we're going to read a read aloud of the story Whoosh, Lonnie Johnson's super soaking stream of inventions. And while we're watching, think about some connections to the text, if there are any words that stand out to you, or anything that you think is a very important idea.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of Sankofa Read Aloud. Today's story is titled Whoosh, written by Chris Barton, illustrated by Don Tate. I hope that you enjoyed this amazing story. Every day brought a challenge for young Lonnie Johnson, the challenge of finding space for his stuff. 6 Johnson kids were squeezed into their parents' small house in Mobile, Alabama. Lonnie would have loved a workshop of his own, but there just wasn't room. There was nowhere to keep his rocket kits, bolts and screws, and other spare parts his dad let him bring in from the shed, and various other things he hauled back from the junkyard. Lonnie loved building and creating. Ideas for inventions just kept on flowing. He learned how to make rockets from scratch. Kids at school gathered to watch Lonnie launch them, and he learned how to make rocket fuel. When it caught fire in the kitchen, Lonnie's mom didn't make him stop. She just sent him to work outside. Lonnie wanted to spend his life designing things, building things, and getting them to work. He wanted to be an engineer. However, Lonnie took an exam that said he would not make a very good one. His dream had been challenged. Lonnie was discouraged, but he knew that whoever had graded his test hadn't met Linux. Inspired by a TV show, Lonnie had built his own robot. He made it out of scrap metal, and valves allowed Linux's body to turn and its arms to move. The switches came from an old, broken jukebox. Lonnie used a tape recorder to program Linux, and as a bonus, the reels looked like eyes. Lonnie wanted to enter his creation in a science fair, but he couldn't get the transmitter to work. Without it, Lonnie couldn't send commands to Linux. Science fairs came and went. Lonnie missed one and then another until he got an idea. Now, Lonnie may or may not have asked before he borrowed his little sister's walkie-talkie, but it fixed a transmission issue. His school's team took freshly finished Linux to a 1968 science fair at the University of Alabama, where only 5 years earlier, African American students hadn't even been allowed. Having to compete in a place that still wasn't very welcoming, now that was a challenge with a capital C. Against other schools from all over the state, Lonnie's team won first place. Soon, Lonnie left home to go to college at Tuskegee Institute, where he stood out as a self-confident, insightful, creative thinker. He stood out as a student who asked the right questions, precisely defined problems, and formulated solutions. And he stood out as the guy who built his own booming sound system out of cast-off electronics. It even had lights that flashed in sync with the best. Lonnie sometimes studied right in the middle of his own parties, The extra studying paid off. He became an engineer after graduation, and that took him beyond Alabama, way beyond. When NASA was sending an orbit and probe called Galileo to Jupiter, the space agency needed to ensure a constant supply of power to the orbiter's computer memory. The engineer who had to figure out how to do it was Lonnie. His challenge was to come up with a lightweight backup system able to keep essential functions going in case the main power was lost. It wasn't easy. It wasn't obvious, but Lonnie found a solution. Some at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory doubted his idea would work. Lonnie convinced them it would. He was right. As it photographed Jupiter and its moons, Galileo was supported by the power package that Lonnie designed. Much of what we know about Jupiter could have been at risk in a power failure if not for Lonnie. Ideas for the other problems to solve just kept on flowing. They flowed whether Lonnie was working with hundreds of people at NASA or up late tinkering with his own inventions in, finally, his own workshop. Lonnie knew the world's millions of refrigerators and air conditioners needed a new cooling system, one that didn't use R12, a chemical that was bad for the environment. He had an idea for using water and air pressure instead. To test his idea, he made a pump and nozzle, connected them to the bathroom faucet, turned on the faucet, turned on the pump, and then whoosh! The stream that blasted across the bathroom was so powerful it created a curtain swirling breeze. It also gave Lonnie an idea for yet another invention. This, he thought, would make a great water gun. First, he had to find or make the parts, including a pump, small enough for a child to handle. Then he had to glue the parts together into a prototype, an early version with room for improvement. Finally, Lonnie tested his strange looking squirt gun at a picnic. Does it really work? A man asked. Sure, Lonnie said. Wanna see? Lonnie worked the pump, which squeezed air into a chamber. Then he pulled the trigger. The air escaped, forcing water out with a whoosh. For a water battle to be a fair fight, there couldn't be just one of Lonnie's water guns. He needed help making more. So he went to toy company after toy company after toy company. The word no flowed again and again, but finally, one company said yes. It planned to make his water gun. Lonnie also had other projects, a water-propelled toy airplane, 2 kinds of engines, and his cooling system. He found investors to provide the money for turning his ideas into products people could buy. He made a leap of faith, quit his day job, and devoted himself to full-time inventing. But soon each plan fell apart, even the one for the water gun. These things sometimes happen, but when they happen one after another to the same person, well, that's some pretty bad luck. Lonnie didn't have a job. He didn't have the money he'd been counting on. He and his family had to move out of their home and into a little apartment. He was angry and scared. But Lonnie had dealt with challenges all his life. He knew a lot about solving problems, and he still believed in his inventions, especially the water gun. Lonnie went looking for another toy company. In 1989, he found a toy maker who was interested in seeing the water gun if Lonnie ever happened to be in Philadelphia. But don't make a special trip, the guy said. Lonnie made a special trip. In his wife's suitcase, he carried a new prototype. He unpacked it, filled the tank with water, pumped the gun until the air pressure was good and high, and whoosh. Kids everywhere agreed with that wow. Lonnie's water gun, called the Super Soaker, became a smash hit. In no time, there were super soakers in backyards, on beaches, in parks, and playgrounds. Each sale of a super soaker put a little money into Lonnie's pocket. All those hours, all those years that Lonnie spent in his workshop had paid off big time. Now, he could afford to do just about anything he wanted. So what did Lonnie do? He got a bigger workshop, which is where you'll find him today. Because facing challenges, solving problems, and building things are what Lonnie Johnson loves to do. And his ideas just keep on flowing.
Okay, so that was a pretty great story of perseverance, right? Not giving up and, continuing even though it might be hard and sometimes you might be told no, to not give up and to just keep on trying. Okay, so now you're going to go to the first Google Doc. It should be called Google Doc number 1 under this assignment, and it is called Annotating a Text. Okay, and what you're going to do on this Google slide, you each have one, you have your own, so you can mark right on the Google slide, is you're going to drag the symbols, the annotating symbols from the left column, and you're going to drop them over in the text, okay? And you don't have to use all of them, but use at least 3. So remember, the blue line is for identifying a key detail. Star might be something that is important, an important idea. Sequence, you could drag and drop numbers 1, 2, and 3. Circle a key word or phrase. You could use the circle. And all you have to do is drag it and drop it, okay? Question mark, if there's something that you're not sure of or you have a question about, maybe there's a word that you're not familiar with, and an exclamation point for something that you found like, wow, really interesting. You can put that in the margin. Okay, so you can stop or pause the video here. Go to Google Doc number 1, Annotating a Text. It is a Google slide. Drag the symbols from the left column into the text, and then make sure that you hit that submit button or turn in so that your teacher can see it. And I will be here when you get back. Okay, it is independent reading time. So this is the time for you to read a book of your choice. Remember, we talked about good fit books. Make sure it's a book that you can read independently on your own. It's something that you enjoy. Find a spot that you can go and that will be quiet and away from other distractions, okay? So before we do that, we're just going to review our annotating symbols because you're going to be annotating with your independent reading book. So remember at the beginning when I told you to get a piece of scrap paper or a Postit note or something, you're going to need that for this part of the lesson. So while you are doing your independent reading, you can leave this screen up if you would like, so to look back at it. And instead of writing in your book, because you might not want to mark up the book that you're reading, if you come to a part that you think you would like to annotate, you can draw the symbol on the piece of paper or the Post-it note, maybe write the page number and why you are choosing that symbol. So that's what you're going to be doing during your independent reading today. So you're going to be thinking of 3 annotations as you read your independent reading book. Okay, you can use those Postit notes or that scrap piece of paper to make those annotations. Maybe it's circling a word that you don't know. Maybe it's putting a star next to a part that you really enjoyed. So you're going to find a spot where you won't get distracted. Get started right away. Keep your eyes on the page. Stay in one spot. Read the whole time. Read silently and think about the book. Okay, so I'm going to stay here. You can use a timer that you find online or set your phone timer or use your microwave or egg timer for 15 minutes, and I will be here when you get back. Welcome back. Okay, hopefully you took notes while you were doing your independent reading and you made 3 annotations. Okay, because now we're going to do something with those annotations. So look at the piece of paper or the Post-it note that you wrote your 3 annotations on. Now you are going to list each annotation that you made and you're going to explain why you chose it or why you picked that annotation. So your assignment, your second assignment, you're going to have a chart that looks like this. On the left-hand side, there's 1, 2, and 3. So I used Whoosh, Lonnie Johnson's Super Soaking Stream of Inventions, but you are going to use your independent reading book. So for my annotations, while I was reading, maybe I made a little star or something next to this line because I thought that it was interesting. Inspired by a TV show, Lonnie had built his own robot. Now, maybe I made a connection to that line, right? I can make a text-to-self connection to this. I once read about someone who was afraid of roller coasters but decided to give it a shot and loved it. It inspired me to try a roller coaster at Disney that I was afraid of. So when I read the part that the TV show inspired Lonnie, I thought of when I saw somebody who was afraid of roller coasters that eventually did it and loved it, and that inspired me. So I made a text to self connection. So that might be an annotation that I make. The next one, I might put a heart, like maybe I put a heart as my annotation, right? And the reason I did that was the line that I picked was, his school's team took the freshly finished Linux to a 1968 science fair at the University of Alabama, where only 5 years earlier, African American students hadn't even been allowed. This was my favorite part because it showed how motivated Lonnie and his team were to compete with their robot. So I'm putting the line that I picked, the line that I annotated here, and over here is why I picked it. For my last line, I picked, it wasn't easy, it wasn't obvious, but Lonnie found a solution. So that might be a part that maybe I would put an exclamation point next to. And the reason that I picked that line is because this made me really think about how hard of a worker Lonnie was. Okay, so you are putting your annotation here, 1, 2, and 3, whatever your line is that you chose, and then you're explaining it over here. You are using your independent reading book. You are not using Whoosh. So you're going to go to the number 2 Google Doc under today's assignment and under the classwork tab for today. And you are going to do that, and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, the Google Doc looks like this. It's called number 2, day 14, Annotating Text. And up here is a little picture that shows the different symbols that you could use. Okay, the directions after you have completed 15 minutes of independent reading. Please share 3 annotations you made while reading. And here are some tips. Number 1, you don't have to use the symbols. I don't expect you to make the symbol in the box. All you have to do is write the line that you chose. Okay, and you're making sure that you're annotating your independent reading book. You're not doing whoosh. And don't forget to explain why you chose that line or that annotation. Okay, so you're going to go to Google Doc number 2, and it looks just like this. It should be under today's date in the classwork tab, and you're going to complete that. Make sure that you mark as done or turn in your work so that your teacher knows that you completed it. Okay, thanks a lot, boys and girls. See you next time.